Because you can afford it, my father declared, increasing my rent by 40%. I've moved out, I left a note. 2 months later, they faced foreclosure. I'm 29 years old and finally free from the financial prison my family built around me over the past 7 years. For most of my 20s, I was trapped in a cycle of exploitation masked as family responsibility, all while watching my older brother Eric live completely free of any obligations. 2 months ago, my parents called a family meeting to inform me my rent would be increasing by 40% to help support my brother's growing family. That was the final straw that forced me to see what I had been blind to for years. I wasn't a family member, I was their ATM. Growing up, it was always clear that Eric was the golden child. He was outgoing, charming, and athletic, everything my introverted, tech-focused self wasn't. My parents beamed with pride when Eric was the life of family gatherings, while my achievements in academics and later in my programming career were treated as expected rather than celebrated. "That's just what you're good at," my mother would say dismissively whenever I earned recognition for my work. After graduating with my computer science degree, I moved back home temporarily to pay off student loans and build savings. What was meant to be a 6-month stay gradually transformed into a 7-year sentence. At first, the arrangement seemed reasonable. I paid $500 monthly for my old bedroom and helped with utilities. I was making good money as a back-end developer, and the arrangement allowed me to quickly pay off my loans and start building savings. Everything changed when Eric lost his job at the graphic design studio 3 years ago. He had been jumping between creative pursuits for years: photography, design, music production, never sticking with anything long enough to build a career. When he showed up at our parents' doorstep with his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old son, my parents welcomed them with open arms. No mention of rent, no discussion of a timeline for moving out, and most importantly, no consultation with me, despite the fact that I was paying to live there. Within weeks, Eric and his family had taken over the house. Their toddler's toys cluttered every room. Sarah's beauty products claimed the entire bathroom counter. Their laundry monopolized the washing machine. And the noise, constant, intrusive noise that made working from home nearly impossible. I started spending money on coffee shops just to find quiet spaces to focus during work hours. 6 months into this arrangement, my mother casually mentioned that my rent would be increasing to $650 to cover the additional utilities. I didn't fight it, though I noticed that Eric still contributed nothing. A year later, it happened again, $800 monthly, with the explanation that expenses keep rising. Meanwhile, Eric and Sarah had another child, further expanding their footprint in the house while shrinking mine. The exploitation extended beyond just rent. My parents began borrowing my things without asking. My premium streaming account suddenly had multiple profiles. My game console migrated to the living room for Eric's use, and my high-end kitchen equipment, purchased with my own money, became communal property. When Eric's car broke down, my father strongly suggested that I should drive him to job interviews. These eventually became regular rides to meet friends, go shopping, or take his kids to activities. My privacy became non-existent. Eric's children barged into my room without knocking, often breaking or misplacing my belongings. When I installed a lock, my mother accused me of being unwelcoming to family. My expensive noise-canceling headphones disappeared for weeks, only to be found damaged under Eric's bed. No apologies were offered, and my parents brushed off my concerns with "kids will be kids." The family vacation to Lake Tahoe last summer perfectly illustrated the disparity in how we were treated. I paid $1,200 for my share of the rental house and food, while Eric's entire family went for free. When I quietly questioned this to my mother, she looked shocked and said, "Your brother has children to support. Family helps family." Apparently, family meant me supporting them, not the other way around. My breaking point came during that fateful family meeting 2 months ago. I sat at our kitchen table across from my parents, with Eric lounging in the corner scrolling through his phone, barely paying attention. My father cleared his throat and announced that household expenses had increased again. My rent would now be $1,200 monthly. Additionally, they needed me to contribute to a family emergency fund that would help cover Eric's car payment and some childcare costs. When I asked how much Eric would be contributing, my mother's face hardened. "Your brother is focusing on his family right now. He's trying to get his career back on track, and those children need stability. Don't be selfish, Mark." I looked at Eric, who hadn't even bothered to look up from his phone. At 32, he had never held a job for more than a year, yet lived as if he was entitled to be supported. I asked the question that had been building for years. Why am I the only one expected to sacrifice? My father's response cut deep. Because you can afford it, and that's what family does. We raised you, put you through college, and now it's time for you to give back. The conversation devolved from there. My mother cried about my ungrateful attitude. My father mentioned all the sacrifices they had made for me. Eric finally looked up long enough to comment that I had it easy with my cushy tech job while he was struggling with real-world problems. I sat silently, a cold realization washing over me. Nothing would change. I would always be the family piggy bank, expected to fund everyone else's lifestyle while putting my own life on hold. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't argue anymore. I wouldn't plead my case. I would simply leave. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully planned my exit. I searched apartment listings during lunch breaks and after work, finding a one-bedroom unit in a secure building about 20 miles away, far enough to discourage casual drop-ins. I opened a new bank account at a different bank to funnel my next few paychecks, ensuring my parents wouldn't see any changes in my existing accounts, which they occasionally checked under the guise of financial advice. I methodically began moving my most valuable possessions to a small storage unit, my computer equipment, important documents, irreplaceable items from my childhood. I did this gradually, taking a backpack each morning as if heading to a coffee shop to work. I set up mail forwarding and updated my address with important accounts using my phone during lunch breaks. I researched tenant laws, confirming that since I had no formal lease, I was not legally obligated to give notice. The calculated part of my exit came in deciding what to take and what to leave behind. Over the years, I had purchased numerous items that had become family property: the large smart TV in the living room, the expensive coffee machine, the backyard grill, and high-end router system. My name was also on the family cell phone plan, which covered everyone's phones. I had my name removed from the title of the old car my parents had given me years ago but still occasionally took for themselves. I chose a weekend when my family would be attending my cousin's wedding 3 hours away. I had begged off, citing an important work deadline, a rare excuse my parents accepted without much pushback, likely because Eric's entire family would need hotel rooms paid for. The morning they left, I executed my plan. A moving company arrived at 9 a.m., and I directed them to take only the specifically labeled items, my bedroom furniture, my remaining electronics, and the boxes I had prepared. I also removed the items that were explicitly mine from common areas. The living room TV went blank, the Wi-Fi went down as I packed up my router, and the kitchen lost several appliances that I had purchased. I left behind anything that had been a gift or that I couldn't clearly prove was mine. The last thing I did was leave an envelope on the kitchen table with my keys and a brief note. I've moved out. The items I've taken are mine, purchased with my money. I've removed myself from the family cell phone plan. Do not contact me for financial assistance again. I had already blocked their numbers on my new phone. I was settled into my new apartment by evening, surrounded by boxes but feeling lighter than I had in years. The crushing weight of unjust expectation had lifted, replaced by a strange mix of guilt, anxiety, and a growing sense of liberation. The aftermath was exactly as dramatic as I had expected. When my family returned Sunday night, my phone blew up with messages to my email and social media since they couldn't call me directly. My mother's messages oscillated between rage and tearful pleas, calling me cruel for abandoning them. My father's messages were shorter, more threatening. I had destroyed the family and would regret my childish tantrum. Eric's messages were the most revealing. Rather than expressing hurt over my departure, he was panicked about the practical implications. Who's going to pay the internet bill? And we need the TV back for the kids. Not once did he ask if I was okay or acknowledge why I might have left. I maintained my silence, though I did send a single email to my parents clarifying that any items I took were legally mine, purchased with my own money, and that I had documentation to prove it. I also made it clear that I would seek a restraining order if they continued to harass me. Then I focused on setting up my new life. 3 days later, my mother showed up at my workplace. I had anticipated this and already informed security and my manager about the potential situation. She was politely but firmly prevented from entering the building. Through the glass doors, I could see her red face as she shouted, creating a scene until security threatened to call police. That evening, I received an email from my father calling me heartless for embarrassing my mother. Again, I didn't respond. Week 1 passed in a blur of anxiety and adjustment. I installed additional security measures in my apartment and began therapy to help process the years of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. My sleep improved immediately, despite the stress of the situation. No more late-night noise from Eric's family. No more borrowing my things without asking. No more expectations to babysit on a moment's notice. The financial consequences for my family began to materialize quickly. By week 2, I received a frantic email from my mother informing me that their cell phone service had been cut off since I had removed myself from the plan. She demanded I restore service immediately for safety reasons. I didn't respond, but I did smile at the irony. Suddenly, my financial contribution was about safety rather than entitlement. By week 3, flying monkeys were deployed. Extended family members began calling and messaging, having been fed a distorted version of events. According to them, I had stolen family property, left without warning, and abandoned my poor parents who had given me everything. I responded to these messages with brief, factual corrections and stopped engaging. The first major crack in their financial facade appeared at the 1-month mark. My Aunt Linda, the only family member who had reached out with genuine concern for my well-being, called to tell me that my parents were frantically trying to borrow money to make their mortgage payment. For years, they had told the extended family that they were financially secure. Now the truth was emerging. They had been using my rent money to pay the mortgage while allowing Eric to live there for free. 2 months into my freedom, I received an unexpected email from Sarah, Eric's wife. Unlike the accusatory messages from my parents, hers had a different tone. She explained that without my financial support, my parents had informed them they needed to start paying rent or move out. Eric was furious, claiming that he had nowhere to go and that I had ruined everything. The part that surprised me was her admission that she had always felt uncomfortable with the arrangement and had tried to convince Eric they should pay something, but he had insisted it was his right as family to live there for free. By month 3, the situation had deteriorated further. My Aunt Linda reported that my parents were now 3 months behind on their mortgage and facing possible foreclosure. Eric had found a job at a local print shop, far below his self-perceived worth, and moved his family to a small apartment. My parents had begun selling possessions to stay afloat, including some items I knew had sentimental value to them. The most satisfying development came 4 months after my departure. My cousin Tyler reached out to tell me that at a recent family gathering, the truth had fully emerged. My parents, desperate for financial help, had revealed the extent to which they had relied on me, not just for housing but for countless expenses over the years. Eric's freeloading had been exposed, and many family members who had initially criticized me were now apologizing, shocked by the reality of the situation. Eric, true to form, accepted no responsibility. According to Tyler, he was telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned the family out of selfishness and that his children were suffering because of my actions. Few were sympathetic, especially after learning that I had been paying more than 3 times what a room should cost while he contributed nothing. By month 5, I received a formal letter from my parents. The tone had changed completely, no more demands or accusations. Instead, there was a carefully worded apology acknowledging that they had perhaps been unfair in their expectations of me. Reading between the lines, I understood what had happened. They had sought financial help from other family members and been refused, likely told that they needed to make amends with me first. The letter ended with a request to talk about the situation and find a way to restore our family bonds. There was no explicit mention of money, but the implication was clear. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to discuss it with my therapist and consider what boundaries I wanted to maintain. Today marks 6 months since I left. My apartment feels like home now, decorated to my taste with no one else's needs to consider. My savings have grown substantially without the drain of supporting 3 additional adults and 2 children. I've received a promotion at work, partly due to increased productivity now that I have a quiet, supportive environment. I've even started dating someone who respects my boundaries and independence. Yesterday, I finally responded to my parents' letter. I kept it brief and clear. I would be open to rebuilding our relationship slowly, starting with occasional phone calls, but with strict conditions. Any discussion of financial support was off the table permanently. Any attempt to guilt or manipulate me would result in immediate termination of contact. And most importantly, I would never again live under their roof or be responsible for supporting Eric. My mother called this morning, accepting my terms with a subdued voice I had never heard before. We spoke for 15 minutes, an awkward, stilted conversation that barely scratched the surface of the damaged relationship. At one point, she started to mention that Eric was struggling financially, but caught herself mid-sentence. I don't know if we'll ever repair what was broken, or if they're simply biding their time, hoping to eventually regain access to my financial support. What I do know is that I'll never allow myself to be treated as an ATM again. The family dynamic was never about love or mutual support. It was about exploitation, with me as the designated provider and Eric as the eternal recipient. The house of cards they built on my back has collapsed, and from the rubble, I've constructed something much stronger. A life defined by my own choices, not by others' expectations. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about hurting others, it's about reclaiming your own worth and refusing to participate in your own exploitation. Looking back now, my only regret is not leaving sooner. 7 years of financial servitude was too high a price to pay for the illusion of family harmony. If you're reading this and seeing parallels to your own situation, know that you deserve better. No one has the right to demand your financial sacrifice while contributing nothing themselves, not even family. Especially not family.